Hello and a warm welcome to this federal special program, Capital B, this early morning today because Donald Trump woke us up with his nation's address this morning, and the speech lasted for about 20 minutes. And it was from the Cross Hall at the White House. And the main points which he said were nothing new. He's repeatedly said all those things in his posts put out on the Truth Social. I'll just go one by one to tell you what exactly he said. Now, he said that Iran no longer poses a significant threat, and he asserted that US holds the upper hand as its military campaign nears completion. Iran is really no longer a threat. We have all the cards and they have none. This is exactly what I'm quoting from his speech. Then he reiterated that US forces are close to wrapping up their objectives in the conflict, and exactly said that we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives very shortly. Then he also said that countries that depend on oil shipments through the Strait of Hormuz must ensure the route's security themselves. He said that US would offer support, but stressed that responsibility lies with those nations to take the lead in protecting the oil that they so desperately depend on. And what exactly he said in this context, I'm quoting him again. I have a suggestion. Number one, buy oil from the United States of America. We have plenty. We have so much. And number two, build up some delayed courage. Should have done it before, should have done it with us as we ask, go to the strait and just take it, protect it, and use it for yourself. So basically, he's given up on the Strait of Hormuz. He says America is not dependent. Now you fight your own battle. Then coming to the next point, he says, which he, of course, has mentioned it yesterday also, and he spoke about the ceasefire yesterday, but no mention of the ceasefire today. He says that US will intensify its military campaign against Iran over the coming weeks, even as talks continue behind the scenes. We are going to hit them extremely hard. Over the next 2 to 3 weeks, we are going to bring them back to the Stone Age where they belong. So basically, no signs of ceasefire, no mention of the ceasefire, but he categorically says that Iran will be hit harder in the coming 2 to 3 weeks. And but he also simultaneously says that the diplomatic channel is open, noting the discussions are ongoing as Washington weighs its next steps. Then, of course, he says that we don't need Hormuz, and then warns the betrayers. He says that United States does not rely on the Strait of Hormuz, and suggested that countries he described as betrayers should instead purchase oil from the US. That point is already mentioned. As gas in the US hit $4 per gallon for the first time since 2022, Trump blamed soaring oil prices on Iran, assuring that the rising costs are short term. This short term increase has been entirely the result of the Iranian regime launching deranged terror attacks against commercial oil tankers and neighboring countries that have nothing to do with the conflict. Then he also says that the core objectives, the strategic objectives, are almost near completion. US's energy needs no longer dependent on Middle East. Then he goes on to say that Iran's navy is gone, air force is in ruins, IRGC command is decimated. Then he says that US forces delivered swift and decisive victory in Iran. And this is what he said in his televised address. And then ahead of his address to the nation, he also said that he would be going to tell how efficient he is as a leader. Tonight, I'm making a little speech at 9 o'clock, and basically, I'm going to tell everybody how great I am. So this is basically the crux of this 20-minute speech, which we saw in a televised address. No questions and answers, of course, because this was a television address. But how do we decode this nation's address or by Donald Trump? All eyes were glued. And the moment the speech ended, the markets started crashing, starting with the Asian markets, whether it was Japanese, Korean, the Indian markets, the gold prices falling. So it's like a complete bloodbath as far as the markets are concerned this morning. This is surely not a good news. But did Donald Trump really play to the gallery? How positive was his speech? He didn't make a mention of the ceasefire. He didn't make, and the same thing what he said yesterday, he didn't give a specific deadline as to when he will exit, except a beat around bush kind of a point that, okay, we will take 2 to 3 weeks to exit out of the war. So joining me this morning is Professor Aftab Kamal Pasha, international affairs expert and diplomat. So thank you so much for joining. We have Sanjay Kapoor, veteran journalist and international affairs expert. Thank you so much for joining, Sanjay. We have KS Dakshinamurthy, who's the consulting editor to the Federal and also an international affairs expert. He writes extensively on the international issues. Thank you so much, Dakshin, for joining. And let me begin with Professor Pasha. Professor Pasha, 20-minute speech by Donald Trump, and the markets come crashing. What do you make of it? Was it a status quo? Or would you say that he's played to the gallery? He's been able to convince the American audience that, look, he's a great leader.
Thank you, Niluji. Uh, you see, the world was expecting him to call off this unjust war with Israel on Iran. But I think not only the American public, but the entire world is disappointed. There is no acknowledgement of the reality on the ground. This is a pack of lies to mislead the world. And I think the markets, as you said, have reacted. And, his repeated assertions that he will take Iran to the Stone Age speaks about the escalation. He had given 3 days, 4 days earlier than 4 weeks. Now he is extending it to April end, perhaps. So he is not doing it on his own or on the advice of his advisors or military leaders, but I think probably Netanyahu, and to reassure himself because he wants to claim victory. So in that way, I think this doesn't meet the requirements. This will only mean more pain for America, its allies, especially Europe and the Arab allies, and of course Iran. But Iran has shown the endurance and the capability. So far, they have taken huge losses in civilians, in infrastructure, gas, oil, electricity, nuclear. Uh, Even the Russian Bushar reactor near the main reactor, it has been bombed out. So extensively, Iran has suffered. But the loss, if you realistically see, if his assertion that we don't depend on Gulf oil is absolutely rubbish because all over the United States, I was just talking to an important analyst in America. He says that every hour the price of oil is rising. If America doesn't need Gulf oil, why are the prices rising in America? It should rise elsewhere. So this is actually people think he is lying and no, he's not telling the truth. And secondly, inflation. Practically everything has become expensive. He was saying that Walmart is planning to close down many of its shops all over the country, and Target also is closing the
Of course,
supermarkets.
right. No, what you're saying is, of course, the reality. But talking specifically about the speech, what do you think was the biggest takeaway of Donald Trump's speech, according to you?
That he is going it alone. He doesn't care the American economy, public, military, allies, Arab allies. He's on his own, violating UN Charter, international law, taking America to the abyss. Because you see, the Navy is far away, and the Air Force, American Air Force, has suffered. And the military, there is virtual rebellion from the Gerald Ford to the key people involved. So in that way, if he suffers more, and Iranians are not short, they still have more than half of their missiles. They are capable of hitting not only the navy or the people who might try to take over Kharg or Israel or even the bases, whatever remains from Jordan to GCC and Iraq. So, and their speedboats are a nightmare for the GCC states. any attempt to push beyond what it has suffered, it simply means Iran will devastate the Gulf oil and gas infrastructure, desalination plants. It's a fight for their existence. So in that way, they will decimate the entire American strategy to remain superpower, and it is the opposite of what he wants to do, that is contain China and Putin. It will do harm to American status, and they will emerge much stronger. They are just laughing away at his stupidity and this Operation Epic Fury, which means America is putting the last nail in his coffin as a superpower, as an empire.
Right,
All the allies are now ditching America. Even
right,
Israel doesn't want to send troops.
right.
So it
But
is an enormous financial loss, military loss, diplomatic isolation. All of this now will end supremacy.
no, there's a huge
Sorry,
disappointment
you're
in
saying
America.
something.
No. I was just saying that there's huge disappointment in America over the Trump speech. And if you look at simultaneously as I'm going live, I'm also watching what's happening on the Fox News. And Sanjay, coming to you, a split screen on Fox News shows that former Secretary of the State, Mike Pompeo, has really trashed Trump's remarks. And what he exactly says is that Trump is struggling to justify Iran war to American people. Now, did you also feel so while Trump was making his nation's address? What do you think is the impact on the minds of the Americans who were expecting that apparently the ceasefire would be announced, but that has not happened? He has categorically said that we'll hit Iran harder in the coming 2 weeks. And obviously, the market also is hugely disappointed.
Thank you, Needu, for giving me a chance to speak to on this issue. I think everybody is quite bewildered as to why he spoke. I think the only constituency that he's been able to satisfy is that of Mr. Netanyahu and his friends who want him to carry on endlessly as long as they want, primarily to destroy, take it back, take Iran back to Stone Age as he keeps claiming, so that there is nobody standing except Israel in that region. But I can tell you, it's getting worse with every passing day, because if what US had thought about it has not turned out to be true at all. They thought that they can bomb out everything, do a Maduro kind of exercise here, take out the leadership, and bring about regime change. But that has not really happened. So, in a certain way, this is a very disastrous recipe for whatever is happening. Today was just, I think, an attempt to tell the people that where it is going, how it is going, but it's not really satisfied anybody. If the market are any reflection of the state of mind of the American people, then he has a lot to explain why he did all this. And now he talks about carrying on for the next 2 3 weeks, and I can tell you, it'll be devastating for those countries that surround Iran. You can see Bahrain has lost its Amazon web services yesterday. More such colossal, hits are going to come in the coming days. And I'm told Israel probably experienced its worst day yesterday. So I think it is really bad, and I don't think Mr. Trump is really in control.
No,
Nobody
but
is
Sanjay,
really
given
listening.
the fact that he made no bones about the fact that he's much a greater leader. Now, say for example, he tried to give examples of how during his first term, he under his regime, Qasem Soleimani was killed. Now, Qasem Soleimani was commander of Iran's elite Quds force, so he quotes that as well. Then he tries to show that how he's done much more than what the earlier presidents have done. What kind of a resonance is this kind of a speech going to have, except for the MAGA supporters, of course? What do you think how the Americans would largely take this nation's address?
I'm not very sure how the Americans. They probably wanted him to get out as soon as possible. Now, he'd already spent, although he tried to justify it by saying that the wars America had been engaged, they've lasted a lot longer. The Korean War, the Vietnam War, and many such wars they have been involved in. But I don't think we are visiting the 60s and 70s of our contemporary history. They are, they are too far away, and people don't have any memory of that. And this time around, I think people know exactly what is happening. This is a highly communicated world where there is a way more information that is coming in, and they don't think Mr. Trump is really so great as he makes out to be. Although his entire movement, MAGA, is also about making America great again. He talks about
Right.
the oil that stolen from Venezuela and says that he's turned that oil source into very something really great, something brilliant. So I don't know where it is all going. It is going to be disastrous. And he
If you
doesn't
look at the
mention about
American,
India.
yeah, he doesn't. He doesn't. I'm going to come to that. But most of the American channels are discussing the tone and tenor and the body language of Donald Trump. Do you think he looked confident while making that speech? Do you think he was much toned down than rather being bombastic as usually he is, Sanjay?
The most important thing is that he normally doesn't speak for 20 minutes, speaks for an hour longer. Actually, he's very fond
Hmm.
of speaking
Hmm.
on the when he sees the mic, really expands, and he likes to talk to the media, unlike our man. And kept everything very short in 20 minutes. I think he had nothing much to say except to justify why he was standing up. So I don't think he was very confident about it, because I don't think the Americans are very confident. The defense establishment is not confident. They have lost
Right.
far more than they have bargained for. They've even had a aircraft carrier being totally immobilized. This is something that they never thought of. It's something that is mentally very, very challenging for them.
Absolutely. Okay, now let me come to Dakshin. Dakshin, Sanjay was briefly, he made the remark that Donald Trump didn't make a mention about India, but there are a lot of negative remarks which I see coming on the programs down on CNN and on across the American channels, and people are generally not happy. How will you decode Donald Trump's 20-minute speech? According to you, does it bring relief, any sort of relief to the Americans? Because everyone thought that probably he will announce a ceasefire. In fact, there was not even a mention of the letter C of the ceasefire, which he repeatedly has been talking about, whether it's a forced one or not. But today he didn't mention the word ceasefire at all.
The reaction to Trump, his particularly his statement that Iran has been decimated, its military prowess has been finished, and have nothing left. The reaction to that came this morning. I think when I saw reports of how Iran has redoubled its attacks, and it in fact targeted the U.S. Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, and it has increased its attacks on Israel this morning after Trump's speech. So, I mean, that clearly exposes Trump's claim that Iran is finished. That's number one. And fundamentally, to me, it appears that Trump is sitting in an aircraft, piloting it, and he's looking for a place to land, and he's unable to find one. So he's going round and round, trying to figure out how to end the whole thing. So because he's also constantly saying he's going to end in the next 2 3 weeks. He's also saying that Iran, even if Iran doesn't negotiate, it doesn't matter. We will finish our job, and then we. So what it basically the subtext of all this is that he's basically looking for some kind of a way to get out of this whole thing that he himself started. So I think that's the impression that Trump's speech gave, and that is also the reason why you find so much of negative reaction, because Trump, as you know, is not somebody who's wedded to truth and integrity. He can say whatever he wants. So that the whole world knows that by now. So people don't take him seriously. What they take seriously is the fact that he's not given a clear plan of action for the next few weeks, and that comes across absolutely clearly in his speech.
But Dakshin, did you also feel that he's really struggling hard to convince the Americans that the way he is handling the war is fine? There should be no questions on that. Is he struggling really to do that?
Absolutely, because what he's saying and what is happening on the ground, it's not like people are depending on Trump to figure out what's happening in the Middle East or West Asia, as we call it. People are seeing it directly. The regional allies of the US are experiencing it day in and day out, and the way Trump is talking, as if it's all the whole world is kind of waiting for him to speak on this and depend on it. I think it's completely wrong, because what is happening in the Middle East is totally different from what he's projecting it. And Iran is, absolutely, it's going gung ho at the US. I mean, it doesn't seem to be coming across as a nation that has been defeated, because it's constantly saying we are not in any negotiation and we don't want to end the war unless it is in our interest. That's what Iran is saying. So for a country to say that, despite being bombarded by missiles for the last 1 month, I think it definitely reflects the that that Iran is far more stronger and far more resilient than what anybody else would have imagined it to be.
Professor Pasha, did you, I mean, did it look as if Donald Trump was completely confused today? Because yesterday he said, and in fact, he said in his post, put out a few hours back, which was like our evening time, the Indian evening time, where he said that Iran is seeking a ceasefire. Now, yesterday he spoke about the ceasefire. Today he says again that America has nothing to do with the opening of the Hormuz. Now it is for the allies and the betrayers to and they have an option that they should buy the oil from America. What does it mean actually? And also, as far as the Hormuz crisis is concerned, how does one see the things going from here?
Yeah. You see, let me just react to your earlier point, how he looked during his 20-minute address. For me, he looked quite different from his usual bravado style, raising his hand and clapping. He didn't virtually remove his hands. They were at both the thing on the podium. And he looked nervous, subdued, fearful. And I think, in his heart of heart, knew that he is being forced to read this text. So that is the small impression I got, because he is very different in other speeches. He would raise his hand, so on and so forth. That apart, there are three points. You see, I thought as part of his Make America Great, he would be honest and truthful and frank to his American audience and the European alliance that in the American economy doesn't sustain the kind of power projection America has built all over the world for 800 bases and NATO and commitments left and right, borrowing uh, trillions from the allies who are now fed up. They don't want to give, they don't want to invest, whether it is China, Japan, European Union, so on and so forth. So economically, he is tight. And this painful reality, all the presidents have been ducking. And he, I think, had a unique opportunity in American history to tell the truth to the people. But he has found this escape route through Iran, clubbed with Netanyahu's pressure, which brought him to power via APEC and Jewish billionaires, so on and so forth. So he is avoiding the bitter truth, which every one of us knows. American economy is broken, and because of which he cannot sustain the high military spending. And after some time, its outdated navy also will be broken, and that we will see when there's the Indo-Pacific
So,
Taiwan
Professor Pasha,
crisis.
from what you are
Secondly,
describing,
the
yes, okay, you complete your point, sir. Then I'll raise the next point. Yeah.
the second point is when he talks about Stone Age, which he referred to, cannot be achieved by the Air Force, whether it is F-35 or F-16 or whatever, combined with Israeli bombing, carpet bombing. It can only be done through tactical nuclear weapons. That is my greatest fear. If you want to reduce the huge centers which Iran has, it's as big as West Europe, and to hit targets, about 32 main targets. Forget about the smaller ones, from Tabriz in the west to Mashhad in the east, Tehran to Shiraz, Bushehr, Isfahan. I'm just naming. He has to use at least 5 tactical nuclear weapons, and that means a casualty of between 5 and 10 million. And if they spare these 5 cities for the tactical nuclear weapons, and if they destroy the other cities, that would achieve his stone age, which he is threatening. But I don't think that option is realistic in the present circumstances. Maybe in the fourth week, if Iran is not subdued, if it is not reduced to beg for peace or sue for peace, then maybe he can that may be last option. But that also, I think, of what Iran can do, that is walk out of NPT and declare after a test that Iran is a nuclear power like North Korea. The third thing, it has global ramification apart from the economic things like oil price, gas, and supply chains, so on and so forth, stock market. Russia and China they were hoping against hope for a ceasefire that Iran has shown its might, it can defend itself. Now they will step in because it's a question of their existence also. Their links to Iran, if it falls, would be very massive because America will not spare one by one. First, probably they may go to China and through Ukraine. The Europeans are also waiting which way America goes. So, in that way, their reaction would be quite unexpected in supporting Iran. And this will lead to quite a few serious implications for not only Iran and the future, but also the entire world as far as tactical nuclear weapons are concerned. I will not hesitate to say that Russia may also give, without Iran using the nuclear option, Russia may give, or even North Korea may give. Who knows? So this would mean radiation effects in the Gulf. And by that time, I hope if Iran is carpet bombed, Iran will destroy the Gulf oil and gas infrastructure, and millions will be displaced without water,
Absolutely.
oil, gas,
No,
electricity, so on.
the
It's a
crisis
nightmare scenario.
undoubtedly. Right. So you're saying it's a nightmarish scenario, what we are seeing, and of course, what is most evident from the markets, the way the markets are crashing. But Sanjay, in coming to the fact that we'll just want to stick to what Donald Trump has said in his speech. So basically, if you look at the speech in entirety, the 20-minute speech, Trump has not offered any clear plan to end the war, which is what everybody was expecting. That will he give a clear plan to end the war? Now that has not happened. Then he has vowed to finish the job. Now, if he has vowed to finish the job, Sanjay, does it mean that he is also within himself realizing the fact that he has prolonged the war way beyond the limits, and now somehow he has to finish the job? And then the third point, which he has said, he's urging the allies to take the Strait of Hormuz as oil prices spike. So, is it like a defeated Trump? What we saw, what we heard in the 20-minute speech of Donald Trump, does he come across as a leader who's realizing that he's got defeated but doesn't want to accept? Yes, Sanjay.
Yeah, in a certain way, Trump thought that he'll do a Venezuela on Iran. He thought he'll go in for a short while, to pick up the leader or bomb him out, and then I think everything will change. But that has not happened. He lives in a cuckoo land in a certain way. He thinks that everything's like a comic book, but that's not true. That doesn't happen. And he had not factored the resilience and the desire of the Iranian people to hit back. They are proud people. He has mentioned how good and bright they are. It's not that he has not been cognizant of it. There are many in Iran who are based in the US. Some of the top guys are in the various industries are Iranians. But having said that, I think he is a very chastened man. He knows that he's bitten more than he can chew, and he's been led into this war by a gentleman called Bibi Netanyahu. He doesn't know how to shake him off because of his very troubled past, beginning from Epstein file and many many other things that we don't even know of. But you must remember that he spoke with Putin in the morning before he went on air in the White House. He talks about how he wanted to tell him to stop the war and do things like that. He talks about permanent peace. So the desire for peace is there. It's not really gone away, despite all the mess that he's creating in the process. But his desire for peace, he thought that he'll be able to bring about broker peace between Ukraine and Russia, but that has not happened. And he thinks that he'll be able to get China on board in whatever he's doing. In fact, he said he's going to China in the next 2-3 weeks because Xi Jinping is a good friend of his, and that is why he thinks that he'll be able to fight it out. So I think there is a desire for new alliances. He's talking mostly with Russia and China, not with so much with NATO. NATO he seems to have dumped quite a bit. In fact, he's been telling them that you have to manage oil on your own. You can't really open a Strait of Hormuz. That's the same kind of submission that he had made earlier. And even the Q&A that he addressed, he said something very, very similar. So I think it's a very different Trump, and is reaching out to people that he had not reached out in the past, to the extent they were seen as so-called enemies of the United States of America. But he wants to make peace with them for his own survival. Thank you.
Dakshin, coming to you for the concluding remarks. That so what has Donald Trump achieved at the end of that 20-minute speech? What has been the biggest import? It hasn't calmed the markets. It hasn't satisfied the Americans. It neither has satisfied the NATO allies, and neither are his goals much clearer now as we enter the second month of the war. So, what is Donald Trump doing? And by this nation's address, what kind of a difference has he really made today?
Whatever he had in his mind, I mean, addressing the American public, obviously that has not happened. And, on the contrary, he has created a lot more confusion and uncertainty.
Yes.
And over the next 2 or 3 weeks, he says next 2 or 3 weeks, and then he also talks about bombing Iran to the Stone Age and all that. My only hope is that the US and Trump does not do something very drastic that will hurt Iran very fundamentally, like hurting, eating out at their energy targets, the electricity grid and all that, which can in turn create a larger response from Iran, and which can turn the whole thing out of control, basically. Right now, though the US has been attacking Iran along with Israel, Trump still has an element of control, in the sense that he can call off the war, or he can end it in whichever manner he wants. But if he goes beyond the point where he hits out at Iran's fundamentals, and Iran responds in a very big way in the Middle East, it can surely spin out of control. So I think we are in a very, very what his speech really shows is that we are in a very, very dangerous kind of a situation, and it can turn catastrophic if not handled properly.
Absolutely. And the speech has left the world in a more confused and in a more dangerous zone. So we'll have to wait and watch how things unfold. But Donald Trump has already said that he is going to strike Iran much harder in the coming 2 to 3 weeks. One quick response from Professor Pasha before I wind up the interview. What is the guarantee that the war will end in 2 to 3 weeks? We are waiting for Iran to respond. We are waiting for Israel to respond. I was just looking at the internet and also X, but I haven't seen any response so far. Though it's too early, maybe we'll get some response in the coming hours. But what is the guarantee that the war is going to end in 2 to 3 weeks? What if it gets prolonged beyond whatever deadline Donald Trump is giving?
Thank you. Thank you, Neelu, for giving me one more chance, just 1 minute or so. You see, what Americans and the whole world was expecting, if not the word ceasefire, at least that America has stopped military action. If that has not happened after so much what we have discussed, I don't think 3-4 weeks he will achieve much more, except causing more death and destruction for the entire parties involved. That is, I think, on the way. My real concern is he is pushing hard into recession, not only in the United States, but the entire world. You imagine just if he escalates, and if the Strait of Hormuz gets choked and the Gulf infrastructure, oil and gas is wiped out, you can imagine how the world would suffer, and more so the United States. And there is no way recession can be avoided if this escalation. And much more is the hardest hit India, where you will find it extremely difficult to get oil and gas, and the entire world is scrambling to whatever is available from the
Absolutely.
rest of the world. So hard days for Indians and Americans and the entire world.
Right. In fact, you
Thank you.
mentioned about the Indians. Yeah, but Sanjay, one quick point which we actually forgot, and because we were so engrossed in discussing what Donald Trump said, you made a mention of the fact that Trump did not mention India at all. What does that mean? Yeah, Sanjay, you'll have to unmute yourself, and I'll also take a quick take from Dakshin on this, and then wind up. Yeah.
No,
Okay, Sanjay.
what my suggestion was that India is one of the worst sufferers of the entire carnage and entire violence which is taking place in the Gulf. And he has not spoken about it at all, although he has given some relaxation in the past about allowing India to buy oil from Iran and also from Russia. But that is not enough. He chose to spoke about China. He spoke with the Russian president, but India doesn't figure in the scheme of things. So that should make, I think, the Indians contemplate. They should think, introspect about what is really going wrong with our foreign policy. It has not taken us anywhere. We've become more servile than what we were earlier in the past. So I think there's a point of reflection. Thank you.
But no, it certainly is a point of reflection, Dakshin. But do you think S. Shankar or Prime Minister Modi, they will really reflect on what's happening and what this Trump's national address conveys for a country like India?
So what it basically shows is India has made itself irrelevant by its actions, especially since the US and Israel started attacking Iran. It goofed up on a couple of things like the condolence issue, and then also, India was in a very good position to mediate, and India refused to do that. And the contrary, the foreign minister termed Pakistan as a broker, and India would not be a broker. Giving it a completely a kind of a twist which was not expected. And in the process, what India has done is it has pushed itself into a corner, and no surprises that Trump had no word to say or mention India.
Indian workers will be the hardest hit. Lakhs and lakhs we will be unable to airlift, or the 7 frigates which we have sent will be targeted by Iran. They will not enter the Strait of Hormuz, and the Indians will be left to fend for themselves.
Absolutely. So tough days certainly ahead. No respite coming in from Trump's address to the nation. So we'll have to wait and watch. Every nation, in fact, is waiting with a bated breath as to what is going to happen. But certainly more death and destruction coming in the days to come, especially these 2 to 3 weeks will be filled with much more anxiety and much more uncertainty as far as the markets are concerned. We'll have to end it here. Thank you so much, Professor Pasha, Sanjay Kapoor, Dakshin. Thank you very much.